Welcome back to my channel, In-Flight Music. If you're new here, my name is Ian, and today we're continuing our MIDI plugin series with NORA. NORA is an arpeggiator that is made by Squareheads. In my last tutorial, I went over scalar, and we made a chord progression in here. I'll link that tutorial in the description below. And we're going to use this chord information to create some really crazy arps inside of NORA. So first, let's take a listen to what our normal chord progression sounds like. Nothing crazy, right? So we're actually going to take that information and we're going to drag this twice. We're going to drag it back onto scalar, and then we're going to drag it onto NORA. And inside of both scalar and NORA, if you go into the FL Studio options, here inside of scalar, you'll notice that I have the input and the output port both set to 0. And I've done the same thing inside of NORA as well. So the input and the output port are both set to 0, and you'll see why here in a second. So here inside of our piano roll, we drag the same MIDI information into both scalar and NORA, and you'll hear that we have a dramatically different version of the MIDI here because of how we linked this. So let's listen to scalar first. And now let's take a listen to NORA. And both of those are the same exact settings. Nothing's changed. All I did was just play the MIDI through scalar versus playing it through NORA. So why is that happening? Well, first I gotta break down what NORA is doing on its own. So like I said, NORA is an arpeggiator plugin. So it takes your MIDI information and it breaks it up into arpeggiation patterns. So here you could kind of see a 0, and then down here you see a -1 and a +1 up here. Well, these are referring to your octaves. So here you have the 0 octave, +1 octave, and then 1 below. So within each octave you see 3 lanes. Typically your most common chords are triads. Those are 3-note chords. So this is taking the first note, the second note, and the third note of whatever chord that you're playing, and they're creating this rhythm for you. So when it drops down here, down to -1, this is taking the third note of your chord and dropping it down an octave. So this is essentially creating melodies as you're playing your chord progression. So how did we get 2 different versions of the same exact MIDI without even changing any of the settings in NORA? Well, it's because of our input ports. So we have the input of scalar going into NORA, which then activates the arpeggio in NORA. But then we have that backwards too. We also have the MIDI information inside of NORA being output towards scalar. So scalar is accepting the input from NORA and creating a totally different arp. So now we have 3 different versions of the same chord progression. We have NORA, we have scalar, and then we have scalar without NORA. Not to mention all the other expressions and performances that you could get inside of scalar, which I showed in my previous tutorial. So yeah, now I'm just going to copy this back into NORA, and we're just going to mess around with some of the presets that are inside of NORA, because there's hundreds of them. There's plenty of presets here to keep you busy for quite a while. So let's switch this up. You could change the speed here, open the ARP settings, and go half speed, double, quadruple, quarter. And then you also might be wondering, well, what about 7th chords and chords that have more notes than 3 notes? Well, you could change that as well. You can just go into your phrase options, and here it says 3 octaves, so you could have more than just +1, -1. So now we have 5 octaves, which means we can go up 2 or down 2 below the main middle octave. And then in terms of notes, you can increase that all the way up to 8. So now we have a grid that looks like this. See what I mean about it being really playable? You have arps, basses, brass, guitar, keys, leads, pianos, pitches, plucked, sound case. Here's piano emo. That sounds amazing. And let's take a listen to what Scalar did with that. You have a couple variations between using... And keep in mind, that's not a trick that you do with Scalar. That's a trick that you could do with any plugin. So let's go ahead and load up Pigments. And we're going to go to our input-output port and set that to 0. So here's Pigments before NORA. And now let's activate NORA by changing our input and output ports. I think that speaks for itself. If you have any questions, comment down below, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.